good morning. I hope you had a good weekend and a productive Monday. The sun is shining in London, so that's good news for all of us. But it's been interesting that over the past few days, since we've been enjoying the sunshine, the government and the WHO have had to remind us of the guidelines and the rules that we need to live within at the moment, because more and more people have wanted to go outside and hang out in parks, and that there is a fear that people are bending the rules a little bit or blatantly ignoring them. So I wanted to talk this morning about something that I'm aware is a very sensitive issue, and so I'd like to tread quite lightly. But it's a type of collective or individual motivation that I'm aware of noticing more and more now as we move into the third week of lockdown and the novelty is definitely worn off, and perhaps anxieties and tensions are starting to re-rise up to the surface. And that's one of the ways that we communicate with each other, and it's the notion of shaming. Shame, to quote the eminent researcher Bréne, is defined as the intensely painful feeling of believing that we are flawed, with the result that we are unworthy of love or connection, which is a poignant definition at the moment when our normal methods of connection are so challenged. She goes on to make the distinction between guilt and shame. Guilt, although it brings with it its own kind of baggage, can actually be adaptive and useful at times, making us make better decisions about our behaviour in the future. Shame, however, generally brings with it inaction, or in fact, overreaction. Over the weekend, I've seen a shift in some of the online communication people have been having with each other on Twitter or social media sites, and I wonder if it might be useful for all of us, myself included, to just take a moment to stop and think about the different ways that we might be making people feel and what it is that we want to achieve with our communication. Because while we quite rightly want to hold people accountable to the new rules and regulations that we live in, there is a difference between guilting someone into action and shaming them into submission. While guilt and embarrassment are often emotions that are researched alongside shame, shame has been established as a separate emotion, and it's attached to a form of judgement and personal label. It comes from a feeling that something has been caused by the person themselves rather than the actions that they did, which could be rectified. It's often a feeling that's more exacerbated when performed publicly. But why does it matter? Shouldn't we be holding people accountable to a higher standard right now? Well, yes, of course. But it might not be the best form of motivation, because while calling someone out on social media for having a barbecue over the weekend, for example, may induce feelings of shame, it might not necessarily make them change their behaviour. Because while there's still much more research to be done, shaming as a form of motivational change tends to be pretty ineffective. It doesn't have the same perseverance effects as guilt, for example, which is often what we feel when we've done something wrong, rather than feeling that we're wrong. Now, this may be because shame has a fatiguing effect, which is generally less motivating in itself, and its exacerbated negative impact upon us means we're unable to do anything worthwhile with that feeling. Shame is an acutely negative emotion, and acutely negative emotions are fundamentally unmotivating, and it can in fact have the reverse effect of what we want, which is make people more aggressive and more determined to perform a behaviour that other people don't like, just to prove themselves to other people. And that may be because when we feel shame, we feel damage to our self-image. If that's irreparable, we won't do anything about it. In fact, we're more likely to respond with inaction, avoidance, and more aggressive behaviour. There is some evidence to suggest, however, that shame can work as a type of motivation if we believe that we can make a difference to our self-image, if we can repair it, if we can let people see our true motivation. But that's not an easy thing to do when you see the viral and quick nature of social media. But there's a human aspect at play here too. None of us have ever lived like this before. We're making it up as we go along. In an earlier post, I talked about forgiveness and self-compassion, and while no one should be above the laws that are there to protect us and keep us safe at the moment, shame as opposed to guilt can cause depression and anxiety. So even if it's not the fear that you might be causing mental damage to other people right now, which might be enough to stop our behaviour, perhaps the wider picture is at play here. At some point, people who suffer from mental illness will need to reach out to our NHS system that are already under tremendous strain. It's not easy. We're living in an incredibly frustrating time. It's upsetting to see other people flout the rules. But the greatest forms of motivation are those that bind us together. They make us feel connected to our values and our societal responsibilities. They are goals that make us feel part of the solution, not part of the problem. If we want to influence someone's behaviour, we would probably first do well to empathise and listen, to form connection and common ground, rather than jump to labelling and insults, which breed disconnection. But there is one fundamental truth here. Nobody knows each other's stories, or how hard it is for people to carry on right now. Perhaps if we bear that in mind, we will quite rightly hold ourselves accountable to a higher standard, but will remove ourselves from any kind of place that might cause further psychological damage to others. Stay calm, and if you can't, let's at least try and stay kind.